Welcome back to Radio Wasteland, and our guest today is Samuel Hoffman. Welcome back, Samuel Hoffman. How are you doing?
I am doing fine. How are you today? Are you enjoying the sun?
Well, I mean, it's a little disheartening seeing how we need more rain. It's like, so everybody's talking about how beautiful of a day it is when we really probably should have some more gray days.
We've got a few real good rainstorms here the last couple of days. It's been great for Montana. We do need the water because we supply the water for everybody.
Yeah.
We're actually in my section. In my section of Montana, we're okay, sort of.
We definitely need the water. We definitely need the water here on the West Coast. I'm in Southern Oregon, so.
That's right. I always think you're on the East Coast. I never know why. Being Earth the brain.
Yeah, no, like 2 years ago or something, a town burned down next to me.
Yeah, I was worried about that again this year. I was wondering whether or not because we had the Great Lolo fire, and that was 7 miles away from me, and we had that what's been about 3 years now, and I was hoping we don't have another repeat of that. But of course, we're going to see that in Washington and Oregon this year, Northern California again. It's because they've just predicted there's going to be an addition to the 30 more years of this super drought. And of course, we've talked about this in the past, and it's not just Earth, it's all of the planets are heating up. So, we're going to be expectedly more dry in some areas and more wet in other areas. And we know that the weather patterns have changed. And, the example of that is the tornado that just went through Louisiana the other day. And it shows you the axis tip because the tornado alley has literally dropped down from now Oklahoma to Louisiana, where prior to that it used to be Nebraska, Oklahoma, and then Texas. And of course, I mean, it was a huge, nasty storm, and we got pictures coming in showing the base cloud of close passing Nepenthe again. So there's a lot more to this huge weather events that are going on than people are attributing, especially, of course, the media and the weather services.
I think about this a lot, and I spend a lot of time concerned about the weather. A lot of people spend a lot of time concerned about the environment because of the weather, or just concerned about the weather in general. My daughter's in Texas, and she had to shelter in a gym just the other day because of tornadoes. And, you talk about how it's because of the Nibiru system coming through, and I'm always like a little confused as to if you're saying that we should still be concerned about doing something about the weather, or if it's just out of our hands.
Well, it's basically out of our hands. What we need to do is plan for it. I've talked about the 180-day cycle, and as of literally today, we are starting the 180-day cycle. Now, I don't know if you had an opportunity to view the Russian video that I sent you this morning.
I've looked at quite a few of them, and that was one of them. Let's talk about it a bit.
Okay. Now, these objects, these asteroids underneath the planets, are now around the two gas giants, Uri and Atu. Atu has a very major moon, and I believe Uri has quite a few, but they're within its atmosphere. It's harder to see. But anyway, there's a whole series of asteroids, and we see them every day, and we see them month in, month out, year in, year out. And we started watching them all the way back in 2010, 2011 from a tiny little dot. So we've watched them come in, and they have a specific pattern that repeats itself nonstop in the skies around the world with regular sightings, which is how we also know that they are real. And this asteroid group is between Earth and these passing planets. So they're also causing, that was what that video I sent you was, a picture from Russia, and it's the lead object and the red asteroid and the spiral asteroid, and they're all intermixing, and they self-illuminate due to a static discharge, just like 4-foot office tube lighting, when you've got two electrical poles and a large planet and a large planet between, and you've got these little physically attached bodies, or the gaseous particles. They illuminate, and that's why the lead asteroid in the OCG is object cluster group that we always talk about. Illuminates, and that was the video that I sent you. And this is also part of the 180-day cycle. Now, we've watched these asteroids when they go by in close proximity to the other smaller planets. We've seen discharge in the atmospheres and everything for many, many years, especially around Atu and Atu's moon, where there's these upward lightning storms that go up, because lightning does not go up. It never did until, of course, the planets got here back in 2010, 2011. and which is also some proof. And we never used to have purple lightning, which is also a representative product of the passing planets and the object cluster group and everything else. So to wind up the whole story, the 180-day cycle is when they are the closest to Earth, and they affect our weather, and they literally drag through the atmosphere. We talked about this in another show last year, where a close pass of the asteroid group literally ripped up an entire region, and that was where that long, drawn-out tornadoes and everything all the way across the United States for 200, 300, 400 miles, whatever, however. I can't remember exactly how long it was.
Yeah, I remember.
But the debris field, and this is where I always try to point out to everybody, the debris field on most storms, if you're talking about a tornado or whatever, your average class EM 4 or 3 or whatever, it's only going to drag it up to the top of the weather pattern. Most weather like that runs upward of 12,000 to 15,000 feet max. Even with a supercell, you might hit 20,000 feet with a big, big supercell. But the debris in that storm that we also documented and watched and took note of was ripped up to 37,000 feet. And that means that something way above all of our atmosphere was pulling the debris that high, because there's no way a tornado at 12 to 15,000 feet is going to spew debris to 37,000 feet, which proves that it's an object above us that's pulling and creating this cylindrical updraft ripping away of atmosphere into this tornadic-like expression. Do you follow me?
I do. Yeah.
Or did I lose you?
Oh, no. Yes, I'm sorry. I said I did. You must not have heard me.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I barely heard you in the background. So the 180-day cycle in these close proximity asteroid groups and multiple smaller bodies, but beyond the ones that we regularly watch, and there's thousands of little ones. When these close passes occur for the next 3.5 or so, 180 days, how months that is. We're going to see increased events of extreme weather, from major rainstorms to major electrical storms to major windstorms to all kinds of crazy stuff, including the crazy that goes along with affecting our brains and the animals and people around us, and et cetera, et cetera. So we're in for a real show, and I was even talking about that to the people yesterday on Montana Skywatcher 2, where if you look in the west, to the west northwest at sunset, you are going to literally see some of the best show that we've ever seen, because Saturn and her yellow moon are visible so large over the top of us now, and then Nibiru is behind that on the right-hand side of the setting sun. And they're so huge now, and you can see this fire-like, almost base cloud pattern that goes around Saturn's yellow moon, compared to Attu, for instance, which makes Mamantis clouds. Attu's moon, they make these huge Mamantis clouds. But anyway, they're a smaller, finer, fire-like pattern that encases this very large yellow moon now. And it's, of course, showing up in worldwide sightings for months now, because we're literally going underneath Saturn and her yellow moon and Nibiru now, where we have never done so prior. We have not been this close to Nibiru, even on her first pass back in 2011, 2012, where they rose up from underneath us. So now we are literally, for the first time, in a real close proximity, as they're beginning to rise above us and start heading away, because we've gone past the halfway point of the term. And I'm thinking, another 8 or 9 or 10 years, and then the system will be, more gone. I mean, how do you weigh that? Because we started seeing it in 2009. But anyway, I'll let you hit your next question, because.
Yeah, no, no, I get you, and there's always a lot to unpack here. One thing that I was thinking about that maybe you could explain to me about these orbits and the way this works is, we've been talking about this for a couple of years now, and I'm a little confused on the distance. Like, has it come and gone in a couple of years, or is it here
No, what
for a couple
happens
of
is,
years?
I've always had a real huge distance, because we see this out view, and they look really close to each other, and I've always wondered about that as well. But if you look at the compound makeup of what the two solar systems, the compound of the two binary linked systems actually is. They are in a close-knit spiral in the center of our solar system, not including our solar system, because we're actually the smaller solar system. So it's us going through them. And we're a widened out, larger, spread out solar system. We've got, two major gas giants or three major gas giants, and they're spread out in a weird pattern, but they've got two major gas giants plus all their debris and everything. We have an Oort cloud, they have an Oort cloud. Now, we're going through them, and they spiral at a tighter spiral because their star is larger. And then you can take into account gravity and mass and all of this, so their spiral is tighter and a tighter knit, where we're running off a smaller dwarf yellow star, and so our spiral attachment, our magnetic thread that holds us in place and why we spiral behind it in a static cling is much wider because we have a smaller star. So we are passing through them. So it's really, of course, there's a lot of distance between 93 million miles between Earth and the Sun. That's a lot of space. And there's only two tiny little planets, Venus and Mercury, plus all the little debris and the, Ceres and Makemake and all of the other small asteroid semi-planet, depending. And of course, that also boils down to the view of mankind on what is a planet and what is not a planet. But if you look at the makeup of proton-neutron count for the makeup of our binary solar system, it has many, many more bodies than man takes into account. And I've never gotten into a lot of that information because I didn't want to distract from those people who barely get it as well. But distance literally doesn't have anything to do with how you look at it. It should be viewed as under shell structure, placements of the atomic structure. And we're a double star, a star within a star. And there's more details on that because you have to view it. You can't view it through Einstein, with the dinner plate and little planets circling around our star on a regular basis, because that's not how it works. We're traveling through virgin space at all time, and we play catch up in a spiral behind our stars. So you have to revamp how rotation, orbitation, gravitation, and all of that is re-looked at, because we're not on one plane. We're not on this one little dinner plate. We're at different elevations and depths according to the structure of each of our solar systems, yet attached to each other, following the star, which is and following the gas giant Nibiru. And a lot of people don't get that. The two stars are held together with massive, massive gas giant unlit star Nibiru, which is vast. I mean, it is huge. It is huge. But according to for instance, other stars, everything that we're talking about is very small, like compared to Betelgeuse or any of the other major blue or white stars that exist out there that are these gas giants beyond your wildest imagination in other parts of our universe.
Speaking of the names, I wanted to ask you, we have the name Wormwood here in the comment about the lead asteroid over Russia. And I was a big fan of C.S. Lewis growing up. I guess I always assumed Wormwood was from the book, the Screwtape Letters, but it might have come from before that. Why are some people calling it Wormwood, and then why do you have different names from what they might be calling it?
Because basically it has about 5 or 6 or 7 different names. But yes, in fact, this is the asteroid, the object cluster group is Wormwood. Wormwood the Destroyer. These are these asteroids that are underneath, they're in groups, and they have specific areas that they travel at all times, because they don't orbit around our solar system like Earth does. They orbit underneath the gas giants in their own orbitational sort of southerly Oort cloud. And now I've noticed that most of our moons in our solar system are in the northern hemisphere. Now, with all of the Nibiru planets, the 8 planets, the 7 that we normally watch, all of their major moons and their lunar activity is in the southern hemisphere, which has led me to believe that we have a polarity opposite, which is why we don't steal planets from them and they don't steal planets from us. Like, we are not going to go along with, because there's a rumor, everybody says, Earth is going to go with Nibiru this time. And it's like, that's not happening, because they're a polarity issue where they stay to their group, we stay to ours, just like the little Scotty dogs and the magnets and You can bring them close, and they spin around and push away.
Okay, I got a question about
So
this then. I got
go,
a question about
go
this.
ahead.
So if that's the case, um, so polarity is like when you flip the wave, right? I'm not telling you. I'm telling the audience.
You're
So your
starting to catch
your
out.
pe- peaks and the valleys of your wave are flipped, and therefore things will repel one another. So is it likely that other groups of planets that are in this same sort of situation have the same polarity, and maybe it is a catastrophic situation?
A lot of that has to do with makeup. Whether or not I believe that objects that have an electrical core are more likely to repel with their personal magnetosphere than not. And I think where we're seeing any planetary object that runs into another planetary object, that would be due to a core value, uh, cease. Like Mars is more likely to hit another planet because it has such a lesser core and a lesser electrical value, less of an atmosphere. And I believe that eventually that is what occurred because at one point in time, the entire top half of Mars's atmosphere was burned off. Now that could be from an actual plasma exchange where or it crashed or something hit at an angle. Angle of impact has a great deal to do with it as well. If you're a slow-moving, close-passing planet, you're more likely to repel than hit because your electrical body magnetosphere is completely opposite of the other, and the two atmospheres get together and they start pushing each other away.
Yeah,
It's the
because
same thing that you cannot put your finger through the tabletop. In all actuality, if you were to microscopically view this occurrence between the tabletop and your finger, you would see an electrical storm because my electric charge and the tabletop have two complete different electrical bases. And they argue when you don't actually touch the table, there's a little microscopic subatomic electrical storm that will not let you put your hand inside the table.
yeah, that always
That's what occurs.
amazes me at the complexities of existence. The idea that I'm never actually touching anything, but it's one of my main senses
And that's the
is to
unification model
almost
that
touch
Einstein
things. Yeah.
that's the unification model that Einstein could never perceive because he was always looking for what it works in the subatomic, and then they were trying to figure out why the planets work the way they did out in space. And you cannot separate the existences between what goes on in space and in inner space in our area in our living room because the same rules apply. And this is where when he brings in gravity, his equations will never work because we do not live off a gravitational scenario, although it is a byproduct of it. We live off an electrical universe, and water is electric, and air and the gases out there in space are electric, and this is why we see the events and the illumination between the asteroid cluster group and all this other, and why the planets don't hit us, even though they come really close to us on hundreds of occasions already. And this is of course going to lead me back into the next topic, which would be the light issues. I can't believe that people aren't seeing the light because the light is so messed up by how close these planets are passing to us
Well, I
that we're
gotta I
having
gotta
these days.
admit to you, hang on,
But
before we go on, I have to admit that I have established some pretty terrible habits thanks to COVID of not going outside very often. So you're gonna have to explain the light issue to me pretty well because I haven't.
oh, I agree. And even my kids are not going out as much as they should. Their hair color hasn't gotten blonde yet for this year. Um, yeah, the light issues. It even shows up in television. And if you go back to old movies running from 2011 on, and you can, if you start paying attention, the trick is if you really want to see the planet, start looking at the dark areas in pictures first. When you see a movie, when you see the newscast, look at the sky and look at the dark area first. And then you'll notice there's a clipped off edge of the sun because there's a planet actually cutting off a smaller corner edge or on top of, or in some cases, three edges, left, right, and top. Or even, and of course, lately a lot of asteroids have been crossing the sun and intermixing in with the sun. So the captures these people are getting are all intermittently weird, and they've got this, sort of almost X-ray focal thing going on in their normal pictures, and they're wondering why. It's because the asteroids are crossing the sun as well. and this is that same group of asteroids that is below Atu's moon, Uri, etc., that are cutting into our view and so close to Earth that we're actually seeing the. Now remember, we see the dark side of all this stuff between Earth and the sun, and so we're seeing the backside, and the side illuminations are becoming more and more and more prevalent now that the planets are going higher and higher above us and passing Earth. And like I was saying earlier with the west, when the sun is setting in the evening, if you look into by the northwest, you'll see up in the sky these illumination occurrences of, now we're talking sky fillers, we're not looking for little stuff. These sky filling illuminations of these rounded planets, and if you look this evening or in the next couple of weeks, you're going to see this boiling Saturn's yellow moon with these little fire-like clouds around it. In some cases, you might even see an illumination, because that happens a lot. And we've been getting some great captures from that too as well. So it's cutting off the light, and the light, it looks weird. And if you see something looks really weird up there, spend a few minutes looking at it, and by God, you'll notice that off to the west or off to the excuse me, off to the east, you'll see that it's dark over there and dark over there, and it's like, wow, and you're just illuminated in a sliver that is shining between the passing planets. And people just they don't get the light issues. It's huge. And of course, Nepenthe is coming in with a rain bomb, and it's affecting. If you look at the Amazon, and you look at Australia, and you look at the southern hemisphere, they're flooding like crazy because there are side passes still of Nepenthe, and that's going to increase because we're back in the 180-day cycle. So they're all a lot closer than they have been again, and this is the closest they've ever been, and this is so time proven because our pictures match year after year after year after year, except they've gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's excruciatingly exciting, and for those people who have seen it and can't unsee it, they're completely on board with this. But if you haven't seen them yet, now you need to. I mean, wow, because this is the event of a lifetime, and they're so big on top of us right now that we're going to see some drastic effects this year for sure. Absolutely.
Um, in looking at your stuff, and I'll preface this by saying that Samuel Hoffman, to the audience, has a very large, very loyal following. But every once in a while, I do see those people come through and comment on your videos and stuff that, say something like, oh, this guy's got it all wrong, or this guy does this. They're not people saying that Nibiru is a lie. They're people saying that they know what's right about Nibiru and that you don't. Is there a lot of this confusion? Are there a lot of camps when it comes to this?
Yeah, there's so much disinformation that's been published. Oh God, even way back in 2011, 2012, it was just unbelievable. And I did radio programs with other people, and they downed me, and I'm sitting here in the afternoons, in my yard watching the planet, watching Nibiru and Amel Saru and Nana concentrically orbit each other, right out my window, and these people are telling me I'm crazy. But that's the thing that they can't touch is Montana Skywatcher has been running since 2010 officially, but of course I was documenting from 2009 on and doing Google research and everything else, and that's back when you could actually get into the satellites and do this. And we were watching the webcams in Antarctica, and while they were trying to distract everybody with the Elenin thing, saying, "Oh, look here with Elenin," from the underneath of the planet at the direct same time was the first sightings of Nibiru from Neumayer Station, Antarctica. Now, if you look at Antarctica right now, there's hardly any snow there. And they're, of course, talking about the heat wave that's going on both poles right now, and which it is. We're seeing a huge heat up of the planet. So the other people aren't taking into account the fact that we've been doing this every day for 12 years. So we have compiled information that no one else can touch unless NASA's, of course, got secret groups of people doing more with more tech than we have. And we're blocked at every avenue. But this is why worldwide sightings from people, citizen science, pays off, because we culminate this information. And when you get sighting A and sighting B and sighting D, E, and F, and it's from around the world, then that it's not overhead clouds that you're seeing. It is a phenomenon that is occurring much higher or much more distantly above us, which is how we've proven this over the time. And we have, of course, been very strict about our science policies and made sure that the only topics that we generally discuss are time-proven information and topics that we have actually proven. And we started out without even naming the planets, but only when the fourth or fifth planet got here and it matched all of our other information did we add the tags. Because we've been careful on our science, and there are other people out there that don't do that. And that boils down to them talking about one or two pictures or a capture or an occurrence or this or that, and they don't mix it all together and form a summation. Now, I give credit to, Suspicious Observer and Mr. BBB 333. They do a great job, but they don't come to summations. And then there's hundreds of other nibiru groups. Then they're all running that, we're still talking about a red planet with wings. No, the red planet with wings is Saturn and her yellow moon, and she has approximately 3 moons, which is why she does ionized trail, blah, 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 which we have proven through thousands and thousands of pictures and close-ups and throughout the, 6 or 7 cycles of the passing of planets now. So we have proven this information where other people have not. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's where it would have led. I guess I was just more asking if there was a fair amount of infighting between these different groups, or if
Oh
they,
yeah, oh yeah,
yeah,
oh yeah. And
wasn't
and
sure if
then
they were
and then there's different
respectful.
terminology. We have terminology issues where you can hear when they call this that celestial core, and that comes from the money boys group and all this, and I'm not going to mention them per se. They don't need any more
That's fine.
fame and fortune. But there's multiple groups out there that they run on their own terminology, and most of it has a tendency to be very distractive and not scientific and superstitious laden and fear indoctrinated and everything else. And before you know it, they're talking about underground military bases and orphans being rescued, which is all Q information. And we see, yeah, there's a lot of crazy crap out there, and you literally have to have hip waders on every day to wade through it and ignore the smell.
Yeah. So what about these names? Like, nah, I got a better question. A lot of fans of paranormal stuff, I'm thinking about Kara here, are late night, and I start to wonder when the last time they saw daylight was. So my question is there anything that people can look for at night to help them see or understand this?
There, yeah. Look, again, we go back to looking at the dark areas. People talk about, are there stars? Because I can see the stars. In a lot of cases, lately, I haven't even been able to. Lately, I can. The last couple of days. There are periods. Now, these planets move. Now, there are periods of time where they are over the top of us, and they'll literally black out entire areas of the sky, and you'll see a very weird illuminated base cloud, or you'll see a slight illumination on what's going on. Now, presently, Saru, a planet we haven't seen in almost 4 or 5 years, is starting to come back. Now, she snuck in around the other side of the sun and went behind Nibiru and is now on the right-hand side and coming in soon as they continue to rise and pass, because she's actually the holder of, there is Saru and then Uri and Atu and Isatum trail on one side and Matim, and they're all on one part, and then Nibiru and Isatum are on another side where the full count isn't completely known yet how it's laid out in orbit. But we're starting to see the illuminated base core of Saru, and it is very much bigger than Nepesity. Nepesity has a thinner 3-band base cloud with the snorkel that sucks up our atmosphere because it's a smaller planet and it does its thing. But Saru is 5 times the size, supposedly, according to rumor, 5 times the size of Earth, and it's putting off this illumination. So you'll see this weird north sky illumination just after sunset, and that will be the illuminated bottom of Saru, because just after sunset, Nibiru is literally working over the top of us, over the top of Earth now, in the north by northwest sky all the way, literally filling the sky to the east. and Saturn and Saturn's yellow moon are in front of that, so it goes from the northwest to the due north and directly above us at sunset currently, which will change. Oh, by the way, we also have to mention, today's date is, March 24th, 2022, because of a lot of this information that we talk about in some of our past shows, people take as current, and it's not current. Each of these shows has different information because the placement changes literally every month. And I needed to say that. I should have said that at the beginning of the show, the date, but
I'll try to record it into the intro. Maybe I'll record it into
yeah,
the
okay,
intro.
yeah. Or you could even, just say today's show is, whatever. But anyway,
Right, yeah.
I apologize. I don't need to tell you how to do your job. You do a great job.
Whatever, Sam.
And
Whatever.
so all of this, no, you do a good job.
I'm
All this
teasing
information changes. Get the old dry throat from talking too much. Back to the cough drop. As I almost choke on it. It's transitional, and in the near future, I believe they're rising higher and higher above us, and in some cases they might be getting farther and farther away. So we're going to have the opportunity to see them go away, and that's when they're a lot easier to see when they were smaller. And a huge portion of our information comes from the fact that we watched them come in year after year, day after day, month after month, and we got a look at how they behaved and the color that they were. And I remember back in like 2013, 2014, when we started seeing Asatum and Nepesity, and they were so much smaller than Uri and everything, and you sat there and we thought, well, what are those? And then they got bigger and bigger and bigger, and then boom, there was Nepesity, and it was perfect pictures that were coming in of the actual green planet, and all the information fit like puzzle pieces, and it was just like, wow. And ever since then, we've known that we're correct, and part of why our information works as well as it does is because we do know, and we have a level of confidence in what we're doing compared to the other people out there who are just guessing, and they're always trying to come up with this and that, and maybe that's angels or the dragon, or and
Angels,
we go back to the wormwood
dragon.
thing. Yeah, well, the wormwood is also considered the dragon. It depends on the culture.
Oh,
You could go to
okay.
Quetzalcoatl in the Mayan, because these are all occurrences that each of these cultures have seen over and over, because this is not one cycle. This happens every 3,654 years, and it has happened for over 300,000 years. So, we're talking 83 cycles already, and this just happens over and over and again. And, we have the big, giant crop circles. We have, cave paintings that all match all of this stuff. And if you take the two suns and the binary system into account, all of a sudden you can read this stuff, because they're all drawing two stars on everything, and the little guys with the 4 arms and 4 legs, and you start to understand it's the shaman that are teaching you information that normal people wouldn't understand, and that's how it's all laid out. You can even go to we talked about the Corbin Bible before. If you take into account the binary system, all of a sudden the Corbin Bible makes sense, because they're describing to you the passing of the passing planets. And nibiru, in other languages, means the planet of passing. So and they're here.
I know we've covered this before, but so basically, Sitchin's interpretation of the 12th planet was basically mistaken, and he got to those numbers because we were going outside of our own planet. Because in his interpretation, he's kind of saying that they include the sun and the moon and that.
Right, and he didn't have the count, because he didn't cross-reference the subatomic chemistry. It's chemistry. Everything works. And another thing that people in modern science don't take into account, the interaction electrically between the binary system. You've got these bodies, and we talked about 4-foot office tube lighting in the past. The illuminated gases between a office, you have 2 poles of electricity, and then inside the tube there's all these gases. And when you accelerate the electrons in between these 2 poles electrically, you have an illumination, because the accelerated particles are bouncing off each other, and they put off office lighting. That's how an electric 4-foot tube office light works. And that's what's going on in the skies above us with with the object cluster group and everything as well, between the planets and the discharging and the placement. So we run off an electrical universe, not a gravitational. And if they don't take that into account, their equations are not going to work out. And this is, of course, why we ended up with a 12th planet, because they were taking into account other bodies, and it just didn't make sense to them. And then, of course, there's also the limited ability to track our past history at that point in time through science. And we were, even today, we're still running on 1890, 1880 physics. And it's so drastically much grown since then, and yet we're running off that basis of understanding as the human norm, that people haven't really grown their science at all. And this is, of course, what I hope to change, because Einstein and Newton, and I was yelled at for this in 1980, Einstein and Newton were wrong. And they were, because there's more to it than that, because they didn't have the second solar system to take into account. And this electrical exchange between the gases and the other planets and everything can literally be attributed where Earth's water overall came from in the origin, because this was going on back then too. I mean, we are what we are. We're a compound. We're not a destructive scenario. Earth isn't going to be destroyed by Nibiru, the destroyer, or anything like that. But this is a cycle that happens. This stable cycle that happens time after time after time, which is how our planet has changed and will continue to change.
Now, people are heavily motivated by their fear a lot of the time, and your answer to this, no, and I don't know, is an acceptable answer. But given the situation in Russia and the explosion of tensions around that, I guess I should put out there, we've talked in the past about geopolitical things maybe being related to this. Is the Russia situation in any way related?
It could be a huge distraction. It could be an argument over who's dealing with what faction above us, because we know the factions are here. We can actually bring them into the Texas cube and the Longbox cube have been mega sighted for the last 2 months, and they dropped in orbit. And they're more visible, and the more of the craft. And I'm not talking the little saucers flying around. I'm talking about the big Carillion cruisers, the big, galactic cruisers. And I think it's a huge distraction on one hand, and on the other hand, if you take into account the planetary effects of the passing planets, which is making everybody sore and very aggressive, I could see why Putin is doing what he's doing. Older people have some forms of dementia, and that does not allow them to see life as it truly is, and they could be behaving poorly. And I'm not in Putin's corner at all.
Right. Yeah. No, of course.
I can't believe that someone would actually, in this day and age, think that they would have the right to annex an entire country and then blast people the hell out of the way he's doing. I don't think this is cool in even the most remote. And I'm, on one hand, agreeing with Biden, and on the other hand, I wish we'd kind of actually get in there and stop it. But, you have to draw the line someplace. We don't want to end up in World War III, and yet we've already known that World War III could be listed all the way back to the beginning of the Taliban and all of this. So, it just depends on how it's written down in the history books 30 years from now.
Yeah, I guess
and it could all mishmash into one porridge.
Yeah, that's true.
So we the whole region, and when Trump let Russia take Afghanistan, or not Afghanistan, but the upper Syria area, and all of the, there's a huge refugee crisis going on there with millions of people that they've completely stopped talking about. So, and that's still going on too, with the Kurds and all of this, and the Sunni and all this religious war that's going on. So I don't think it's cool in the slightest that this is going on. And if he uses nukes, oh my God! And of course, that's got everyone on edge. And it's scary that we've allowed our world to become, and yet there's a lot of us that need to step up and actually get with the program and come the hell off, stop watching TikTok, and actually become involved in our world around us, because there's a lot of crap going on. And, I don't want to get crazy, but we need to be involved.
Yeah,
and I hope the Russians... Go ahead. I hope the Russian people get involved.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, we were talking. I want to say it was before the show started. About I was asking if the one of the great filters for life in the universe might just be being stupid, because it seems
Oh
like
yeah.
we're invested in actively hurting ourselves.
There is a lot to the statement ignorance is bliss. I can tell you because I don't socialize well because I know a lot of stuff that I wish I didn't know. And then of course I wouldn't be able to work the way I do if I didn't know it, but I'm glad on the other hand because I'm here to, get this information out, and this is why I don't do this for profit or sell books or t-shirts or any of this other crazy crap because I'm trying to stick to a level of credibility and why I stuck my face on it. And yes, I'm really putting my nards on the chopping block, but I've always felt it's very important to be as generically open as you can be and not completely put your head in the guillotine.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. If
which
you're
I'm doing up
rallying
to a
people,
point.
if you're rallying people to a cause, you have to be transparent.
And I have no animosity toward any government, including my own. And therefore, I'm not pulling any dissident behavior. I'm just trying to inform scientifically, and we really have to. And I've said this 1,000 times. We have to get on board with this because we've taken the time to prove this in over a 10-year doctorate. And I mean, you could start calling me, Dr. Nibiru or that crazy Nibiru guy. One of the, I mean, but and I've
Dr.
gone
Nibiru
overboard
has
with.
a good ring.
I mean, because we've done a doctorate here. I mean, we have done an everyday research project for over 12 years now, and we are not wrong. And you can, and I'll plug Nibiru Followers Anonymous on Facebook, and I believe she also runs on YouTube and probably even TikTok. Um, she does a great job of doing. She takes comparative. She has more time than I do in certain cases. She takes the stuff that I put out and then puts my drawings and actual sightings that we all share and post together because she's a sister site. And she does a great job. And we've done so much comparative work that are exact matches over the last 12 years that you can no longer deny that this is all factual. And people, here I come again, have to get on board with the fact that we have really proven this. And you got to look at the dark areas of the sky first. You can't look with just the sun because A, you'll be blind, and B, you won't see the rest of the stuff that's going on either side. And if you look, you're going to see these little smaller things. And if you look at the dark areas in the sky above you, and it's tumultuous in hell, and you stare at it long enough, you're going to see asteroids by the dozens climbing over the top of you. And then when you start to wonder why all of a sudden there's a windstorm from hell, you connect the two of those. We had storm wind in Montana last night you wouldn't believe, and it was not in the forecast. And so, here we go on the 180 day because it comes out of the blue. And all of a sudden, you've got a storm from hell, and I've had my roof ripped up over this. And I watched it go by. It's the coolest storm I've ever seen in my entire life, and that was way back in like 2015, 16, when it was still tiny, and now they're huge. So here we go again, and I just try to keep warning everybody, you've got to prepare for this stuff. And we've talked about, learning how to live with, without electricity or your cell phone, because I mean, there may, come to, you don't have water, you can't go anywhere. Look what gas costs right now. I mean, you know,
Yeah,
um,
frankly, that's what's scaring me the most about this world is the collapse in economy. I'm going to go off on my soapbox here for a little bit because everybody's like blaming Biden. And then everybody's like blaming Trump. And I'm just all like, coronavirus just happened. Uh, that was under Trump's watch, but they all disagreed with it. I don't blame Trump. Biden comes in after Russia happened. I don't blame Biden. It's like the economy is scary. Frankly, I gotta
well,
say the
we
economy
have
is
the greed
scary.
factor.
Yeah.
We have the greed factor because we have the fear factor, and we have everybody saying, "Well, look, I'm not making it," so they're going to charge more. And these are the business owners, and of course, there's even talk like, why are the prices not going down when we've already added to the fuel reserves, which is being pumped up out of our environment, which is hugely toxic to our environment, but nobody even looks into that. It's great that we're doing electric vehicles and everything, but no, the president, our governments have very little to do with this greed factor, and corporations have taken over things, and they bought in hospitals, they bought water rights. People should look around and see that. Guess what? Everything got bought out from underneath us, and we're in deep shit. Period. And if we're going to allow these mega monopoly, and I mean the monopolies are just left and right now because the government is not doing their job because they're just trying to raise money for the next damn election. And they're not, I mean, they don't even write their own bills anymore. The business of government is no longer functional. There's greed and corporate catastrophe occurring. We have supply shortages. Guys, when are you going to wake up? You cannot run business as usual. We are already across the point of no return, and people need to do something about this and not celebrate, business as usual. We cannot do it. We're already in a global warming crisis beyond their wildest dreams, and it's only going to get worse. And we've seen the evidence of this happening year after year, cycle after cycle. And here we go. And the gas crisis is just part of one of the inconveniences we're about to suffer, and there's
Yeah,
going to
but
be more.
from our conversation earlier about the weather changes and the other planetary system, you're saying we're having a global warming crisis. I mean, what can we do about it? Given if what you're saying
Well,
is the case, what could we do about the global warming?
well, the only thing that people can do, and if you've seen any of the old crazy movies from 2012 to Knowing to all this other stuff,
I watched them all.
literally, now if we look back at the last cycle, the Minoans and the Mycenaeans disappeared, and there was global change, global warming. There's a vast cycle that shows up on ice cores from 1750 all the way to 1635, 90 some odd year period of time, whatever. Somebody will yell at me for my math, but anyway, the small period of time where we went through this huge double global warming, because the first one was really bad, and then there was a small one a few years later. And we're going to literally, in most cases, have climate change where people are going to have to move, and they're going to have to go to regions that will support life, and we might see excruciating extremes from both cold, flooding, dry, you name it, everything. And we'll get back to, we're not in Kansas anymore, and we're going to see there. California is going to be dry for the next 10 to 15 years, and so everything is going to get worse than it already is, including fires and no water, and they're not going to grow our crops anymore, and then we're going to see more expensive. So people really need to get in their home gardens, and of course everybody's flocking to Montana like crazy. There is no houses available in Montana. You cannot buy a house here.
We're having the same problem here in Oregon, and my wife and I are actually climate refugees. We actually moved out of California and moved north because of the drought and the heat and the fires.
Right, and then there's talk about that, and of course I don't try to swim in the gossip, but they're talking about the new standard living region being somewhere in northern South America, where we live in same latitude, longitude region of where we used to be. So an Earth tip, and we're still wobbling, and we're still having occurrence where one day the moon is deep in the south, and then the moon is way up in the north, and that of course has to do with planetary push and Earth wobble and all this other stuff, because the magnetospheres of each of these larger planets will push us and tip us farther on our side, and then all of a sudden the moon will move, because the moon doesn't move, Earth does. We've always seen the same view of the moon, and when the moon is tipped, it's not moon, it's us. So, and then there are a lot of people need to remember that, because they don't, and these asteroids are going to cause problems from heck too. I mean, we might even see more, Kansas tornado scenarios where you see entire regions just ripped away by storms. And if you look anywhere in South America right now, they're having nonstop flooding all over, and Australia is flooding big time. And China went through that last year, and they're still having issues weather-wise. And of course, Russia is freezing their butts off because they've had the Arctic pole, and the pole value is moving back and forth pretty bad too, and increased in speed to where the actual North Pole has been moving for many years, and that of course has to do with the planetary tip and the extra second sun. And people have to take into account we've got that second big ass star behind ours, and there's evidence of some major coronal holes coming around this week, And the back blow and side blow CMEs have been off to the left and right a little bit, but more over the left. So I think separation is coming or occurring as we speak. So it's going to be a very interesting next 6 months for sure, and it's going to be just wow. And and I keep telling people, if you have a roof on your house, be very happy, because there's so many people. Like, look at ask all those people in Louisiana, what, 2 3 days ago, they just lost their roofs, and it wasn't expected at all, and that thing ran all the way up to Tennessee. And the storm patterns, they're the same. And if you look at the rotational storms over the top of our pole regions and everything, and you count the low pressure systems, we have a boiling nightmare of an atmosphere that we've never had before. And for literally the last 6 or 7 years, all direction on the weather on both of the regions of the hemispheres are going the same direction, which has never occurred in my known history. It used to be our weather in the northern hemisphere went one way, and then in the southern hemisphere, the weather went the other way. And that's always been normal. And as of about 5 or 6 years ago, that stopped. So now, because I believe we're laying on our side, I think our weather is skidding in one direction on both hemispheres. But so everything's changed, and we have to view this as this is not going to be business as usual. We have to prepare for that. And I, of course, am not financially able to do anything about moving or anything like that. So, I have to make the best with what I have and start learning. And if the shit hits the fan, which it does every cycle. And there's a question down the page where the guy asks something about where I never talk about the number of people being wiped out.
Well, why
And
don't we address some of those? We've been chit chatting
go
here
ahead.
for about an hour. Let's address a
Yeah,
couple of these questions.
you can make your beat as long as you want.
All right. Andrea, for the audience, was nice enough to put up a very intense video. Andrea, if you're listening, that was some. It's like we're entering the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That thing was intense. But we got some questions here. I'll do my best to pronounce names. Nestor Ariel Bonicalzi. Can he explain, please, if Nibiru and Tiamat are the same monster or separate celestial objects?
Well, that depends on who you look up. Um, Tiamat originally, in some information that I have read in the past, was originally a much larger planet, which supposedly Earth is a fragment thereof. That's the one that I remember the most. Now, in a lot of lore about Nibiru, there is multiple names, and especially with some that come off of the Dr. Harrington group, where they literally renamed the planets in order to keep the original names classified. And among their lower people, they renamed them something that was acceptable, and then one of them was even called Harrington. So I don't even remember if that's off that, but you have to be careful of where you get your information from. And from the information that I remember, Tiamat was a larger planet that Earth is now a segmented, smaller part of, and they believed it broke up, and that's where Mars got the top half of its atmosphere burned off, was due to a passing piece of debris, et cetera, et cetera. That's all I know about it.
Oh. Is this the one from where they think the asteroid belt might have come from? Is this what we're
Right,
referring to? Yeah, okay, I know what you're.
right, right, right. And the asteroid belt, of course, it has to do a great deal with the formation of our solar system, as well as possibly more of the Oort cloud could be from Tiamat. But supposedly, in the early formation of our solar system, Saru, Earth to brain, Saturn or Jupiter was supposed to be the ignited star that would form our solar system, but then there was something else that caused a different effect, which is, of course, the extra binary star, and that it created a different gravitational, shall we say, electrical occurrence, which created its own small dwarf yellow. But anyway, that's a compounding thing.
Well,
I lost
Nestor,
track of where.
that's all right. We
You know,
covered it. Nestor also asked within the binary system with Imaru, Hercobus / Nemesis. I need some explanation there. And the surrounding planets and stars. Is Nibiru the only one that will cause havoc?
no,
Yeah,
We've
I'm
seen it. We've seen every close pass of what even Attu's moon causes some extreme weather close by, and this is where you see the gigantic mantis clouds that literally glow in the dark because you can see the inner illuminated face of Attu's white moon, and it's the neon mantis clouds are the bottom of Attu's moon. Now Attu causes its own. It has a what we call a snail foot, when it's this drop tail that snorkels and sucks up atmosphere and does all kinds of nasty stuff because they're smaller and they rotate, and that rotating ion drop axis will actually suck up some of our atmosphere and cause disaster. Uri, when it crosses over, covers the Earth in a cloud base that is so wide that we literally for weeks end up our Earth temperatures drop. Saru causes a snorkel effect, but doesn't pull anything in because it's already got a whole bunch of stuff underneath it. Between Uri and Saru is another asteroid field that we don't even discuss. And Nibiru, I think we just sort of pass by Nibiru almost like one of its moons. And it doesn't cause a great deal of effect other than to tip us on our side and shove us out of the way. And then some, minor disturbances with the two concentric moons passing before us. But generically, for the most part, what we have a lot of trouble with is the passing asteroid group between these planets and us, because it has to do with a gravitational, magnetational thing.
Now, hidden here in Nestor's second question was something that maybe you should clarify for him. It's within the binary system with, and it says Imaru, and then in parentheses, Hercubus and Nemesis.
Right.
You want to split apart those three names for him so he can
Well,
better understand?
Hercubus is what they've produced pictures of throughout, known within the last 30 years or so, and they called it Hercubus. That, of course, is a human-handed name. It's another title. Imaru is the planet's official name from off-world information, according to what I know, and that's why we've stuck with it. But it's a gas giant. It's massive. Nemesis, of course, is a term that has come from literally the Dark Ages and been cross-referenced because Nemesis is also a character name, and therefore it's a pseudonym. And it's what people buy into is the easy.
It does have marketing
Nibiru for Dummies
potential.
101.
I got to say, Nemesis has marketing potential.
Right, and that's where you could call it an archetype, like they discuss in Aliens or Symbols of an Alien Sky, which is a great series, phenomenal series from the Thunderbolts project, and I follow a lot of their stuff. And they're finally getting on board with some of this. They're scratching the surface, though they don't know it. They're doing a great job. It's just co-names that easy information has sunk in. It's like the people calling string of pearls or another crazy name that. And this is why I don't go into that, where I try to stick as factual as possible, because if you start mistagging everything, and before you know it, everybody's confused.
Right.
Like, what does that mean? I don't know what that means because I read this, and then this is why we've been as hardcore about sticking to the facts and time-proven information only, and try to limit the conjecture. And a lot of people say, forget everything you learned on the internet. These are the facts. So
yeah, well, I have the idea to come up with a website I'm never going to make, so I'm going to put it out there, and maybe somebody can make it so I can use it. I wanted a website called Jargon, where you could look up any topic and it just give you a list of the terminology so that you could then go in and learn better because you understood.
Google kind of does that.
Yeah, but
Bing
there's a
has
lot of options. Obviously,
Bing, Google. I go to both Bing and Google sometimes, and then if I have questions, I'll ask the nice people out there, because believe me, I'll get 67 answers, and 2 of them may match.
That's how you know it's
really
the real
tough.
one.
The thing what blows me away, and I forget this all the time with a lot of people that I deal with. I deal with a couple hundred people a day, and I forget that they're on their phone, and and I'm sitting here looking at a 43-inch screen, and it's huge the difference of what they see versus what I'm researching all day and every day. Of course, and I'm of course the clearinghouse where all of this information comes, and there's been a lot of documentation, but there's no way to stick all of this stuff anywhere but the human brain, because I remember the cycles going back, and this is how I'm able to do it. And I have hundreds of thousands of pictures. So, and this is how we do this. We do comparatives, and then we ask for current information, and that way we don't distract or lose the new people.
Hey, well, we got
It
another
pays off.
question here from Susan Gregory. What is, and we covered this a little bit earlier, but what is the estimated distance of each object? Could you post them on your drawings? Even a far out guesstimate would be awesome.
Yeah, I have no way to measure that, and I would be absolutely wrong because they move and they get recycled in, and it's not like they're static in one place. We see them rotate. I watched 3 planets go by this morning, and overhead in the north to northwest sky, I watched Datu. I watched Datu's moon. I saw the asteroids underneath, and then I watched Nepesity come in, and I just went, wow. I mean, it's just so plain. Once you know what you're looking at, they move. So I can't give coordinates, or we do that, but. And this is why I do the monthly drawing. And there's no way to judge the distance in our out view because we're looking through water. Our atmosphere is a water type, blue hue. And even when the planets get closer, they actually turn more blue than their actual planet color. So all of these effects are really hard to take everything into account, except that we've been doing it so long that we learned what the base clouds and everything on them are. So giving distance and judgment, I sit there and I to this day stand there going, how the hell are they that close together? But I've got to take into account we've got a 37% graduated view through liquid. So therefore, it's like looking through a magnifying glass. You're not going to get a perfect picture of what we're seeing. And there's no, I don't have a laser measure stick where I can point it and shoot it out, but I think they're anywhere from 3,000 to 10 to 20 to 30,000 miles away from us at any given time, and they come in cycles and rotate past us every day. And they're such a tight center solar system group that it's never made sense to me. I can't still to this day understand it, except that they're on a tighter spiral because they're larger and their mass would make them centrifuge at a higher rate of speed. Beyond that, I can't imagine the distances. It's beyond me. And we can't take into account size versus distance either, because when these planets are close, they look like they're massive, but when we're looking at Nepesity, in front of us, and then Uri over to the left, Uri is so much bigger than Nepesity, and yet it only shows twice its size. So it's really impossible to judge size and distance because we're seeing through a liquid atmosphere.
Yeah, I was watching some show that was telling me that this is off topic, but it's what we do here. It was telling me that all eyes evolved underwater before they even came to the surface, and that we all see things as slightly distorted because all of our eyes were evolved to see underwater. And then we crawled on land and they changed at that point, but nobody's eyes actually evolved in a dry environment.
Well, I totally believe that the birds can see in spectrums that we can't. I believe the animals see in spectrums that we can't.
Yeah.
Because we've had evidence of that when the birds were chirping at 3 o'clock in the morning or midnight for a period of time when the planets first got here.
Oh, yeah.
So they were reacting to like a moonrise scenario where they're seeing this large colored object appear on their horizon where we don't even see it. And this is why I always tell everybody, look at the dark areas first, and when you can figure out the dark and then work your way back to the light, you'll see so much more.
Yeah. And animals can definitely
and
see it. I saw a show saying that dogs and cats can see each other's piss, which is like, makes a lot of sense. Helps me understand what my dog is actually marking and that it's effective. So, yeah, the senses, yeah.
Yeah,
All right,
there's things going on that we don't know.
okay.
including spirits and ETs and all this other stuff, because there's stuff going on. They're actually discussing on world news tonight in the late night news on ABC. They're talking about the invisicloaks finally.
Oh, I saw that. I did see that.
Yeah, and its technology is 25 years old, so they're talking about it. Yeah, there are invisicloaks, and they are quite real. And if you see a warble in the forest, run.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Predator. We've all seen Predator.
No.
We know what's about to happen.
Yeah, right. Exactly. There you go. I'm trying not to go to the extremes to scare people, but yeah,
Oh
you're
yeah, yeah.
exactly
I'm
right.
sorry. I'm a movie buff, but
Uh, well, because I've seen the real things in the forest that or that are scary too. So and didn't run, and that was stupid.
all right. Our next question is from 1 John 2.26, which I'm going to guess is a Bible reference that I don't know. The most important question, he says, when will Planet X objects be totally visible, where they can not be denied and the government will be forced to reveal what they know? I am aware that they are visible now to people who can see them, but the public at large still doesn't get it. So he wants to know, when are they
Well,
going to be visible to the point where the government has no choice but to say yes?
I would imagine they will be more visible as they leave, because then they've passed above us and into the light. They've got to be beyond Earth before we can see, because they're dark. We're seeing dark backsides of them, and only the crescent flares and side illuminations, etc. And then now they've done this since 2017ish, where they've actually gone beyond Earth in their orbital rotation past us in the daily cycles. And we've seen illuminated faces of them. But then also they have atmosphere. So a lot of times what you're doing is you're looking at this big, huge, rounded object with all these clouds around it, which is what Earth looks like also from space if you were out there. And if you're the farther out you'll be, the more clouds you will see. And so they'll be illuminated when they pass Earth toward the end of the cycle. And someone asked earlier, where are we? When are they going to be gone? And that would be anywhere from the next 3 to 5 years from now, or sooner. I mean, we're seeing now illumination directly overhead in the north of Isatum, but then it's completely engulfed in these fire-like little tiny micro flame clouds. It's really cool. And then there will of course be some times where we'll actually see the illuminated yellow moon, which we're also seeing illuminated asteroids on the other side of the sun. But that's the answer.
All right. Luna 3015 asks, how do asteroids illuminate if the system is between Earth and the Sun? Why are the planets apart from Nibiru not mentioned in the... well, I guess she has multiples. Let's go with, how do asteroids illuminate if the system is between
Well, their
Earth and the Sun?
static discharge occurs. They build up static when they come when the larger gas giant and its asteroid group come close to Earth. There's a difference in electrical value, and that causes that. This is where we're seeing the shaft lighting and all these pictures and everything. That's called an ion bleed off, where one body starts to steal ions from another because it's different size and likeness and electrical charge, etc. And then the core valued electrical bodies of these asteroids that are bouncing next to each other could be viewed as hyper accelerated protons or neutrons, depending on their charge, because you could have actually positively charged asteroids with negative bodies right next to them. And when those become accelerated or enhanced or hyperactivity or whatever between the two bodies, they illuminate. And we've got numerous pictures of, as a matter of fact, I sent you a couple of them. And that was what that video from Russia was the illuminating object cluster group, which we've been watching come in since literally 2009, when it was just a dot in the upper left sky. And it was always bright and it was always illuminating. And we just had to figure out what the hell that was, which is where we call it. And then eventually, about 2017, we started getting side views of them and close passes and everything else. And this is where we ended up calling it the object cluster group, because it was these clusters of objects. That's where the OCG comes from. And that's what they illuminate, because they're hyperactive between the two bodies.
Like arcing electricity.
Right? Yeah, they become self-luminescent because they become accelerated between the process between the two planets.
Gotcha. Not well. This harkens back to our discussion about a fluorescent light bulb, I assume.
Right, it sort of does. Just depends on how your point of view and the size size of the object and the gases in between. Because there's gases in space as well, and these accelerated particles have something to, be accelerated upon, and so they illuminate.
Luna 3015 also asked, why are the planets apart from Nibiru not mentioned in the Sumerian tablet?
Because it was probably too much information for them to write down. I'm sure that they were listed. The other planets were, and they were, of course, focusing on the gods. And this is, of course, where the demigods live is on Nibiru, and so that's why it was discussed. And then maybe the other races were not subject to mention.
Gotcha. Like if we went to their planet, they'd ask where we're from, and we'd say Earth, right? Is that what you're saying?
Right, right, right.
And then she asks, I don't know who this is, but she also asks, would you be open to a debate with Ben from SO or anyone else on the topic of the system? I'm not
Well, I
sure what
know
Ben from SO is.
Ben from a Suspicious Observer.
Oh,
I
okay.
know Ben.
Mhm.
Ben and I met years ago, and then Ben is running a very good program. Um, and he, of course, has corporate funding and he has bills to pay, so he doesn't discuss Nibiru much anymore. But I'm hoping he's stuck with the information because we used to talk briefly. So, uh, yeah, there is no debating it. I'm not wrong.
Okay, so let's say this for Emily. She had a I call for a new gathering meditation. Indeed, let's make it happen. All right, Emily. See.
What?
Dirty
Okay.
Skies California. Great username there, Dirty Skies. Having done quite a bit of research, I find the term conspiracy theory to be offensive. I prefer the term conspiracy realist. I see why Andrea put it in. Not much of a question, but pretty funny.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, our final questions here. Marina asks, we need his videos to clarify what they show. Is Atom and Nibiru confused? We talk about Planet X. By now, we are approaching these planets in Nemesis. So you should know what pre-calculations to take as meteors, asteroids, comets come along with these planets. Big hello, Big Sam. So, Marina.
Hmm. We have put out numerous videos over the years. Planet X Hunter does a really good job. He's in England. Um, that goes back to the fact that these things move all the time. This is why I put out a static monthly drawing, because it's generic and the angles are different depending on where you live on the planet. But the sides of the sides of the sun and the general location of the planets and their sizes it always turns out to be really accurate. And that's the thing. I've always been very accurate. Um, it's almost impossible. If I had a tech team, yeah, we would make some really cool videos. But I'm trying to do research on a shoestring budget, and my computer skills are low on one hand, and on the other hand, I don't want to load so many programs onto this computer that I'm going to lose all of my pictures. So I stay away from a lot of the tech. And Rebecca puts out some really ample comparatives, drawings versus regular weekly sightings. I mean, sometimes I'll do a photo and I'll get a membership capture, and then I'll comment on it, and within 4 or 5 hours, she has the picture done. So stick to Rebecca at Nibiru Followers Anonymous if you want faster information. Beyond that, um, any time that we would create a location, it's going to be obsolete within 2 weeks. So there's been a lot of that. Why we don't put a lot of that
out. Okay, well, I have a question here at the end. At the first half of this year, 2022, there's been quite a few articles coming out where NASA is basically saying that a ninth planet might actually be possible. Now, is this them being confused or them being manipulative? What do you think there?
This is them slowly trickling out information so that they can give reference and acceptably work the moderates into acceptance and yet still get funding and not hand out classified information at the same time.
Gotcha.
because they'll put peanut butter on the bread that's already there, but if there's no bread, they're not going to give out any information except that they'll tell you there's bread and they need money to pay for it. And they do it all the time. We've caught them in so many lies, and of course we've introduced information years ahead of time. We talked about the Skull asteroid about 4 years before NASA did, and then they gave out the wrong orbit and said it would come by every 3.5 years, and their equations didn't make any sense at all while we were watching it regularly and saw it for month in, month out. And it's also becoming, the Skull asteroid has become visible again because as At-2 goes over the top of us now, we're seeing the backside between At-2 and Uri that we didn't normally have our view of, and then right up in between there is the Skull asteroid, and there's a whole bunch of stuff going along with that that's, if you look at it, it's just spooky as hell. And of course that goes back to the wormwood nemesis thing, where there is so much stuff up there that if people don't pay attention to this, they literally should be slapped, because it is that drastic and that serious, and it's that frickin' spooky too. I mean, you should see the stuff that we've got over the last decade. Oh my God, you go, oh crap, and you want to dig a 30-foot hole and put bunker on top of it, and then stack away your supplies and your water and your everything and your toilet system and your heating and everything, because oh my God, you wouldn't believe what this is. And I try to warn people, yet at the same time I don't want to go overboard and scare the crap out of them so they stop learning, because it is so far-fetched, and we've proven this so long ago, and yet and we've become callous to it, because to me it's just generic, and I do this every day. But I can't even imagine what the layman who walks into this vast pile of information that we just throw out every day as a plate of, here's your brunch. I can't even imagine that they're ready to even pick at the plate, because they're just confused. And that's why, we've got people that insist that if you don't go into the background information, you're never going to understand this, because there's so much info, and it's all time proven. And we wouldn't discuss it if it wasn't time proven, because that's how we work, and that's why we're number one.
I have a personal sort of obnoxious question out of my own interest. Have you ever seen the recent, like, 2013 Star Trek Into Darkness movie? I'm a big Star Trek
Yeah,
fan,
yes,
so.
right,
Okay,
yeah, yeah,
at the beginning of that movie, they have Nibiru, where they're trying to shut down the volcano,
right,
with the red plants and the people wearing yellow and stuff. I've always
right.
wondered, did they put any research into that, or was that just entirely made up? Did you see
Well,
anything there where?
I imagine they had some level of information, and somebody back there who spent a little bit of time studying in through the 70s and 80s and 90s
Yeah.
may have picked up that information. And or Hollywood, there's two factions in Hollywood: one that keeps us asleep and one that's trying to wake us up. And with smaller, minor, various factions in between. So I think maybe it was a spark of interest that you can get people to go look up a topic, and maybe they started down that path. And when I saw that, I chuckled over it big time, and I went, oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Except Nibiru is not red. We know that Nibiru is a blue planet. We know it's massive. It's a water planet, because
The one in the
people
movie
do
had a
not
big
live.
enough ocean to hide the Enterprise, so it was pretty good.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, smaller planets. There is such thing as space water, and that's water can land on any planet, and it just takes the electrical sensor charge in order to deal with the atmospheric conditions that will create water, because of accelerated proton and neutron exchange between passing bodies, and that's literally how all that stuff occurs.
There
It's
was
accelerated.
a researcher, Richard Hoagland. I'm not sure if you know the name, who
Uh-huh.
basically said that Hollywood was preparing us for
Yep.
disclosure, is how he put it. And you said that there's two camps. Do we know which is which, or is it
No, we
just
don't.
so vague?
Oh yeah, well and I try to tell people that there are when we look at, we'll talk about the Texas cube and the long box cube. That is one faction, and then Nibiru and all those guys are another faction, and then there's all the other factions that are also here. So there's multiple factions all anybody with money that's trying to covert or subvert uh, the scenario for their own best, special interest or whatever. And that's where I also talk to people about religion. There is no real evil. There's just factional agenda. So there's all of these people that are trying to get us up in gear because we deserve it. We deserve to ascend into the Federation. We deserve to have longer lives as well, which is also possible. And so, and we're going through this cycle because they need us to be far less of us. And this is going back to that guy's question about the genocide. And yes, every cycle, numerous bunches of us vanish. Every cycle. It's a culling of the herd. I don't talk about it because I try not to go there with people and be negative. And Hollywood, there are some people that have enough money and have enough time and have done enough research and know the right people that they're also trying to hint and get to save as many people in a way that they're not going to screw over their own affiliation in money and everything else and status, and yet talk about it in a way that maybe they can get. And this is what I do with a lot of Montana Skywatcher 2. I do a lot of hinting. I don't come out right all the time and tell people the answer, because if you let them find the information on their own, they are more likely to believe it than if you just tell them everything, because they're going to lose a lot of that information. But when they discover it for themselves, they actually take on a higher level of understanding. And yes, I believe that there are some Hollywood factions out there that are actually trying to push us forward because there's a lot coming. We have a lot of time and a lot of things to do next cycle. And it's going to be different than any other cycle because there is the decree that says that we are supposed to, some of us, actually accelerate up in the evolutionary process as humans and break away from the factory planet scenario and elongate our lives and become a member of the Federation and actually have a voice for that which is occurring to our race.
Going off of something you just said, you had said that the long box cube and the other one were one of several groups, and that their loyalties were more factional than anything else. When we say that, do we mean that it's like factional, like conquering a new land for resources, or factional like stepping on an ant mound and not even knowing you did it?
We they don't have to conquer Earth. It's already theirs. It's been theirs for longer than history has ever been recorded. And we're not the first generation of high tech people to live within that series of cycles. Um, they already own Earth, and they're here collecting the commodities. We are going to go through our cycles as we did before, and then over anything past 4,000 and 5,000 years, and all evidence of our civilization is going to be gone, rusted, bye bye, never seen again. Including if you go back to the last cycle, where huge portions of land and where masses of people lived was removed by major tsunamis in the northern hemisphere, etc. There are bunches of us that are going to vanish, and then the system will redo itself again, and it may take 1 or 2 cycles for us, or 3 cycles for us to rise up to tech again. And if you look back through history, 3 cycles ago we had the Great Flood, and 2 cycles ago we had the great climate change, and then earthquakes, and continental shift and changes and all of that. And that's what's going to occur again. So the trick is, let's all live through it, and those of us who will be better for it, and those that do not, in some cases, they may be lucky.
So is it an intentional culling or just a
Um,
natural reaction?
yeah, we're not the first version of us, and so they can reboot us anytime they choose. And they've even in the genome, we've talked about genome. At one point in time, we were boiled down to 273 individuals. And I don't know what the cycle on that dating was, but that was at one point in time. So, they could have a whole great reset, or they could have a semi reset, and of course we know about the Georgia Guidestones and everything else. And so now you can't take that as absolute, proof, but it could be just one faction's opinion. That's why they put them up. there's a whole lot of other people trying to, manipulate the whole situation, and it's not just one or two, three groups. You've got the Draco presence, you've got the Federation presence, you've got the Nibiruan presence, you've got all the other uh, races that are higher tech than them that are involved in this as well. And I'm sure that they've got a certain amount of groups watching and documenting all of this stuff, which is exactly what alien abductions is them judging where we are. Testing our DNA process, see how poisoned we are, see how healthy we are, etc., just like we do with wolves. And that process goes on, and we do not have a great deal of control over it. Like I've said before, we have an off switch, and they can do entire neighborhoods all at once. They can turn a whole region of people off, and then they come in and land and do their business and do what they want, and then leave, and then turn us all back on, and we roll over at night not knowing anything happened.
Let's hope they do us less dirty than we did the wolves, right?
Yeah, well, and that's point of view as well. I mean, you have to look at it. There is a certain, discomfort in sampling animals. You got to yank a pile of hair out with hopefully a little bit of skin to it.
Oh, they're extinct in very many parts of the world where they used to be very common.
And this is why they tag people so they know where they're at, so that when they want to do a test study on a specific individual, they can know exactly where they are. And then they come and turn your neighborhood off or land where you're close to, turn everybody off, walk in, sample, you do the thing, turn it back on, and fly away. And there's lander crafts that come off the bigger stuff, and that's what the discs are, is little lander craft. And they, got a team that goes out, just like in Star Trek. We'll take a shuttlecraft, go down, and that's what they do. And they're of course getting us ready. That's what's Hollywood getting us ready for these behaviors and acceptance, because the difference between the tech that they use, and because I've seen some of it, and I walked the deck of of a ship and saw the control panels and everything. The shit was explained to me, and I went, oh, okay, and I understood maybe half of it. And they're trying to get us up to speed, because it's a huge shock if you suddenly see ET standing there and they've got tech that's beyond you. The level of disbelief will absolutely, for the next 10 years, mess with you. And everybody says, "Oh, take me with you." It is not that easy to swallow. It is a complete mind messer that you have to psychologically deal with for many years in order to understand that this is actually real and you didn't dream it, because it's that separate.
Yeah, so
It's a
it'd be
shock.
like taking Charles Ingalls from Little House on the Prairie and bringing him to our time. He'd probably be really bored. Probably have a lot of free time
or
on his
shut down.
hands. Yeah,
or
totally.
or shut down in the corner. Go,
Yeah.
this is too much to understand, and I can't fathom this. Where the hell have you taken me? And I want to go home. And people have they go, "Oh, I want to meet ET." It's like, oh boy, you don't know what you're asking. You be careful what you wish for, because it's not comfortable. Because they view us as animals, and if we're not drastically enlightened, then they will not treat us with the same respect that they would, one of their co-workers or whatever, or fellow aliens or whatever. So, uh, you know, there is a whole lot to fathom that is beyond what humans understand, and it's a huge rug rip out from underneath your feet to even take in a portion of this. And yes, it's a difficult subject, but we've become callous because we've been doing it for a decade. So, and I say we because it's most of the people that make all of this possible, and I'm just the guy in the middle.
Well, from what I can tell, they sure appreciate it. And we're at the end here. Samuel, I really appreciate you coming on the show, and you are always welcome. Of course, reach out to us anytime you want to come on. We love having you.
Yeah. Well, we got to reiterate that Isatum and Isatum's yellow moon is coming over the top of us, and this is a huge event, and people need to start watching sunsets, and it'll be right above you in the northwest sky, and it's like, and it looks like a boiling mass of clouds as this yellow moon gets bigger and bigger, and it's huge. It's literally like beach ball size, and then behind that is Isatum, and behind that is Nibiru. So Nibiru is absolutely here. So
Well, I got
that's
to give it to you. You've inspired me to start going outside some more. So we'll see what happens.
uh, sunsets are worth it, and sunrises are worth it too. Midday south. I mean, all of those 3 times are your best viewing times, and then spend an hour watching the dark areas move. And of course, remember that close to sea level makes it harder to see, and the higher up you are, the easier it is. I'm almost 5,000, so the higher up you are, the easier it is to see. And remember that it's worth watching.
Why don't you remind the listening audience where they can find out more about you?
Speaking of which, we had to go to private because Facebook was dumping in all kinds of crazies on us. We ended up going to private, but Montana Skywatcher 2. Submit your request and answer
Which
the
is a
questions.
Facebook group.
Right, Facebook group. Correct. Thank you for correcting me. And then, of course, you can always write me at P.O. Box 625, Lolo, Montana 59847. If you don't want to go on internet and talk about stuff, but I have my P.O. Box for that. And we're always willing to take some donations too at that same address. And or go to Nibiru Followers Anonymous, or type my name into YouTube, and or all the great shows on Radio Wasteland, because we've got a whole handful of them now.
Oh,
and if you should, people should go to your site and look up all our past movies, or our past videos of previous shows, because there's a wealth of documentation there. So,
well, again, Samuel. Yeah. Well, again, Samuel, thank you very much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And like I said, next time you're ready, reach out. We're always ready.
Yeah, and thank you always. You do a great job, and I really appreciate that you let me on.
Yeah, no problem. All right. Well,
okay,
you take care of your girls and stay safe up there in Montana.
Will do. Take care.